Welcome to the RRT equation version 4c, high-octane financial engineering. Part 1, the reserve rate technique and the RRT software design. Please note I am working from two screens, reading from one and videoing the other, which leads to pauses from time as I invariably lose my place. We start with increasing the money supply and the RRT, the reserve rate technique. In general, the reserve requirement is the amount of funds a bank must have on hand each night, a percentage of the bank's deposits, set by the nation's central bank. In the USA, on January the 18th, 2018, the Fed updated its reserve requirements table. It required that all banks with more than 122.3 million on deposit maintain a reserve of 10% of deposits, whereafter banks with 16 million to 122 must reserve 3% of all deposits, and finally banks with deposits of less than 16 million do not have a reserve requirement. Because of this, at the very least, the US increases its money supply by 900%, as if a bank has 1 billion on hand and an additional 9 billion is created. It's very important to understand this process, as it's currently the ultimate economics free lunch. If one reads enough economics, one will hear many times that there are no free lunches. And yet, in the example above, big US banks can increase the money supply by 900%. Small US banks can increase the money supply by 3,333%, and smaller banks could theoretically increase the money supply higher still. Okay, with the above illustrated, it becomes a lot easier to present RRT high-octane financial engineering, as RRT does the same thing but differently. They are both ways to increase the money supply. RRT high-octane financial engineering. Before looking at the first manual 2024 to 2080 RRT v4 simulation, I will present a demonstration of the software design described in Chapter 6, S-World RRT v4 Software Engineer Instructions. We start with the initial inputs page. If you have it, please open the spreadsheet RRT v4c Financial Engineering Software, Malawi Network 2024 to 2080. Currently, the version is 4.24, but later versions will have the tabs mentioned below. You might just have to look for them. Find the tab RRT v4c soft-initial inputs. This tab is one of 3 CMS, that's Content Management Suite, pages from which the user can make their own simulations. This tab presents the starting conditions, and if left blank, the user starts with the default values. Now we move to the display page and tab RRT v4 soft 2480 display. Starting at N10 and ending at S17, N10, S17, we come to the RRT calculator, within which we apply the RRT equation. Starting with 6.59 billion in the initial revenue and a value for quantum efficiency E of 90%, so that's initial revenue known as R, quantum efficiency known as E, 90%, which tells us that 90% of the initial revenue is spent with one or another S-World company. We see that equals 5.93 billion in cash flow, which remains in the network, all of which needs to be spent before the date, the 5th of March. This money is recorded at P10, and this value is copied to the second row of the RRT calculator at N11. Where after this process repeats before the 2nd of May, and again before the 2nd of June, and so on until the 8th spin. Each one of these is a spin, where after this process repeats, this is one of those lost my place points, until the 8th spin, where after the balance is transferred to the following year in a process called LCR, the Law of Conservation of Revenue. In brief, we see P17, our final cash flow after the 8th spin, is copied to P53, which is then copied again to the following year, 2025, here, L79, which becomes a factor, a part of this grand total, which is then moved to the beginning of the rest calculator, which completes the circle. Now we add up the 2024 cash flow, which is here, for a total of 33.7, and the cash flow is the main thing we're focusing on in this presentation. Next we move to 2025, and for demonstration purposes only, from 2025 to 2027 I significantly increase E and S, whereas I expect 10, 20, maybe even 30 years of refinement of the technique may be necessary to master such high values. To go down, we scroll down. Sorry, to go to the next year, we scroll down. So now we're in 2025, and we can see E increases to 95, S increases to 16. That's E, quantum efficiency, S, spin. And that creates a cash flow of 76 billion, up from 33 billion the year before. This happens again. 2026, E increases to 97.5, spin increases to 24, and cash flow increases to 167. And again in 2027, E now 99%, spin 32, cash flow 326 billion. Okay, now we go to the controller CMS. And the tab RES v4c Soft 2480 controller. When using the software, after adjusting initial inputs, this is how we create different simulations. When you see a cell in purple, it indicates a value that is created by the initial inputs. So we see these purple cells, those are created from the inputs that are here. Whereafter each row below copies the value from above, unless either a manual change is created or a recession hits. So we see here 115, the row below it is just a copy of it, the row below that is a copy of that. Unless there's a change, it's a copy. Cells in green indicate a manual change that will increase cash flow. Changing spin to 16 will increase. And cells in the clay red color indicate a manual change that will decrease, decreasing E from 99 to 95. From left to right, we start with quantum efficiency and spin, quantum efficiency and spin, then global growth, and note this does not include inflation. After growth, we see R1 exports trade. We don't really use this. Instead, we change by making changes to the network growth. And the macro financial events are recessions. You can see one here. It decreases, it decreases, it comes back a bit, it comes back a bit, and afterwards it repeats the value before the recession. R2 is real estate sales, R3 is aid, and in R4 we have cities, and we can see how many cities in column P. In X we have a total for revenue 1, 2, 3 and 4. In Y we have the law of conservation of revenue, and in Z we have all revenue. Next, in gold, we see cash flow, growth in cash flow in the next column, cash flow to GDP variable, and network GDP. Followed by global GDP, followed by network share of global GDP, which starts at 0.0165%, and in the manual version that we're looking at in the next video, we can see that increase to 1% of GDP by 2050. In AI, we have imports and acquisitions. In AJ, we have exports, basically the E spillage, and AK gives a sort of growth, sort of trade deficit or surplus. AL, cash flow, copy. We've seen this already. Okay, now we move to the final part, and this is what the money can be spent on. Now let me find my place. From column AM onwards, we change to show what cash flow is spent on, starting with Spartan, brackets, social, close brackets, quality homes. Because Labour's share of cash flow is 25%, and a quarter of what Labour receives must be spent on housing, we know that Labour will receive 6.25% of cash flow, which is then divided by the build cost of each home, which was originally 100,000, but now has been increased to 200,000 US dollars, as the cash flow to GDP variable is 50%, which may mean the value of each home relative to build cost, other factors not included, is 100,000, not 200,000. This question will be worked out one way or another when we have the S-World TOEB, Theory of Every Business, S-World DCA, Dynamic Comparative Advantage, and the Siena Equilibrium software. So we see just over 10,000 homes in 2024, which on the manual simulation increases to just under 1 million homes built in the year 2050, by which point the population is mostly or fully housed, and from 2050 to 2080 upgraded, so all Malawians and visitors to Malawi are living in luxury villas, estates, mansions, etc. To the right, we see healthcare, Angel Wing software, solar and electric car budgets, and virtual education. And the user will have the option to add other items to this list of what to be spent on. Okay, thanks a lot for watching. Bye.